how did Sinai change ethics, or did it? And a certain way, what we're starting off with is an idea that we have something we call ethics. Human beings have something we have called ethics. A certain idea of something being right or wrong. And this is sort of like an internal type of feeling that of right and wrong, some sense. There's a question like, what is this feeling? Where does it come from? How is it to be formulated? That's all the world of philosophy and ethics, trying to determine what really should be ethical. And then there's, furthermore, what does that feeling mean? Does the feeling mean anything or whatever? That's an old issue in itself. And you can actually develop the whole argument that it's just a psychological feeling, and you can argue against this psychological feeling. You know, it's an interesting thing that this guy Breivik, who just killed all those people in Norway, he said he had this feeling there was something wrong with committing murder, but he fought it. He really fought it because there was a higher goal and so whatever. But the point is that, okay, so there's this feeling and so forth. And there's a lot of issues on it. Is it real? Is it not real? What does it say? And so forth. The first question, I guess, when it comes to Torah is, how does Judaism look at that feeling? And where do we get ethics from? It's philosophy tries to figure out all those issues of feeling, but the first thing, what does Torah say about that feeling? So the fact is that there seems to be sources within Torah that seem to say there is such a feeling in humanity, and it's real. The very concept of mishpatim, that there's certain mitzvahs that are perceived to be understood, it's almost like there's certain perceptions of certain things that we sort of know that they're wrong outside of being told by God that they're wrong at Sinai. Okay? So there seems to be this idea that somehow Torah does say that there's some value in our ethics, in our in this feeling of ethics. So the question then emerges, what does this say about what I would term revelational ethics? Because if we already have our own internal perception of ethics, what is the necessity of God revealing laws at Sinai? What's the point of it? If we already know that it's wrong to do certain things, what does God add by telling us it's wrong? Okay. Now, there are certain revelational ethics that we know that we would never know about if God didn't tell it to us. So, for example, don't eat pork. I'm using the term broadly, revelational ethics. What I'm saying is there's certain laws that the only source of them is the fact that God said don't do it. Right? And in those laws that God said don't do, we don't have any opinion on from our own internal feelings. If I see someone eating a cheeseburger, I don't have like this sort of emotion, oh, that's wrong, that's evil. I don't have that emotion. Maybe I could sit there and say, it's against halacha. Maybe if I see a Jew eating it, I say, hey, that's wrong to do in a sort of cognitive sense. But I don't have that response that this is really wrong. Okay? And we call those type of mitzvot chukim. So the fact that God gives us mitzvahs that are that sort of tell us that these things are wrong, of things that we otherwise wouldn't have an opinion about, that we can understand. Okay, we can understand that God would tell us certain things like that. But the question comes down to, why does God say don't commit murder? Okay. Why tell us things where we already know? Okay? Now, in that world of that aspect, what we're really saying is I already have a sort of feeling of right and wrong outside of it. I don't need you to tell me, I don't need God to tell me it's wrong, because I already know it's wrong. So why does God tell me it's wrong? Okay? So there are people who try to show that every place that Sinai says something is because it's necessary to say it, because otherwise we would not know it. Okay, so there are attempts to show that even things in like do not commit murder, that there's a reason for God to make that statement, and halachically there are people who define the murder that's within that definition as not being as being very specific. Okay, like for example, like an example, the way we learn that it's usher to hit someone. Okay, how do we know it's usher to hit someone? Okay, so the prohibition, we have a feeling. If I go over someone and just hit him out of nowhere, I would sit there and say that, obviously that would be wrong. We all have that feeling. So where do we know that law from? So the law is from, adding onto the punishment of makot. In Jewish law, there's a concept of lashing someone who is deserving corporal punishment, and in that regard, it is the verse states, don't do more than 40, which is understood by Chazal to be 39. Okay, so if you are the punisher, you're the official position person who is supposed to whip someone. If you give a 40th lash, you have violated the biblical command. Now, if you look at it and say, well, wait a second, that's not the same thing as don't hit someone. So you sit there and say, listen, the guy already deserves to get lashed. To give him an extra lash, I don't think that's so bad. I wouldn't say it's so bad. The guy deserves lashes anyways. Okay? I'm not talking of a situation where in our own mind we think of someone who in some archaic system didn't deserve lashes and was given 3 lashes, so obviously he gets a 4th lash. This guy really deserved lashes, and he's supposed to get these lashes, and you give him an extra lash. I don't think, we don't really have that emotional feeling. But the halacha basically says that's a violation of hitting someone. And that's the halachic source for hitting someone in general. If you look for halachic source, we're saying. So that's an example where the command clarifies a situation which we would not otherwise know, from our own ethical perception, that it is prohibited. Okay? So that's it. But the fact is that basically when we try to have this struggle is we're sort of saying, what is the need for revelational ethics in areas where we already sort of have an emotional perspective already, that I'm using emotional, that gut perspective of right and wrong. If we know it's wrong to commit murder, why do we have to be told don't commit murder? So one way of dealing with is by saying the biblical command actually relates to a specific case. But the truth is, in the case of lashes, this is generally the idea, it does extend into, the way some people understand it, is that it clarifies situations where we would sometimes have a question, but it still still touches upon this basic concept of don't hit someone. So, for example, this is the concept from Rasaji Gaon, where he basically says that don't commit murder. There are questions we would have exactly what is murder. And this, the Rab points out that we have questions where it is in terms of abortion and euthanasia. What really is murder? So we need the Torah to clarify it. So there is this approach to revelational ethics that says when the revelational ethics give, step into the world of natural morality, it's to clarify. Because natural morality has some questions. We don't know exactly where euthanasia is, where abortion is, and so forth. Therefore, there's an idea of having clarification through the halachic system. Okay, so for revelational ethics, clarify natural morality in the areas where there is a natural morality. So we need Har Sinai to tell us don't eat pork, and we need Har Sinai to tell us some things that we would not otherwise know, even with our broad understanding of natural morality. Okay, so that's a simple approach that revelational ethics can clarify that. But once the Torah is entering into that field, it's going to make a broad statement: don't commit murder. Okay. The point is why is our natural morality not have this sensitivity? If the natural morality is real, then it would have something to do with the divine, placing it within ourselves. So why doesn't God give us that sense of knowing when abortion should be usher, or when euthanasia should be usher? I mean, why do we have? Why do we need to have clarification from Revelation once God has already given us this type of sensitivity? Right? Okay? So the point is it seems to be that this thing called ethics, some sense that we have from human beings, and the fact is that there's a need, and then Revelation superimposes itself upon this ethical perception, and that's the real question of what does Sinai do. So the simplest answer to how does Sinai change ethics, in those areas where people aren't clear, Sinai clarified. Okay? Simple. But why did we need Sinai to clarify? Why didn't we have a sense ourselves? Okay, so the question is why do you have this mixture of revelational and natural morality? Okay. So the fact is that if you get into this whole idea of how most people look at Sinai's relation to our ethical systems, most people look at chukim. The Rambam makes a distinction that in Mishpatim, in Shmona Prakim, the Rambam says in Mishpatim we're supposed to have a sense of what's right and wrong. In the chukim we're not supposed to have a sense of right and wrong. We're supposed to have a sense of just following God's will, being obedient to God. So the Rambam is very emphatic about this in terms of, let's say, eating pork. Eating pork, you're not supposed to have a sense of it wrong to eat pork. You're supposed to say, hey, that bacon cheeseburger looks great. I'm sure it's very, very enjoyable. What can I do? God told me not to eat it. But I don't have a necessary feeling towards the eating of pork. When it comes to murder, I'm not supposed to say, hey, I really like to kill that guy, but what can I do? God told me not to. Right? So that's usually something. So revelational ethics is sort of to show obedience to God. Natural morality is to sort of have this sense that something's wrong. When you say that you needed revelational ethics to clarify, what does that mean? Why did you need God to? Is it the fact that if you have this sense of clarification in those questions where you have it, you're supposed to say, I'm supposed to do it because I'm obedient to God? In other words, are you let's say that examples of murder, are you supposed to have to say, well, most murder I'm supposed to have this sense of a feeling that it's wrong, but on the fringes when the Torah has to clarify, I'm just following those because I'm obedient to God? Or is it that somehow you're supposed to take that and integrate that into your natural morality sense? So that becomes part of the issue. See, one of the things that also is a problem is how natural morality is also very fluid. Okay, in other words, if I tell you that the Torah tells you this is the position on euthanasia, it's not so difficult to say, okay, eventually through my mindset, I will learn to say that this is my natural feeling towards it as well. The fact is, that really tells you that natural morality is fluid. And as you see from, let's say, the example of homosexuality in our world today, okay, now the natural morality of the world seems to be that it's wrong to have any perceptions of this being wrong, right? But the Chinuch writes in his explanation of the mitzvahs, when it comes to the mitzvah, he always gives an explanation of the mitzvah. When it comes to the mitzvah of homosexuality, he basically writes, this is davar yedua. In other words, it's natural morality. I mean, of course it's wrong, right? And it's very interesting about this fluidity. So the point is that with this fluidity, you can begin to say, well, then really, what kind of value does it have? So, but then you have this idea that we're supposed to have this idea of certain mitzvahs that we're supposed to have a certain value to. It was just interesting. I saw on the web or something today that they had a Miss Canada pageant in last night or whatever. Mm-hmm. You guys heard about this? And
the representative is transgender.
Well, one of the women, one of the individuals,
competing.
One of the individuals became a whole human rights issue because this individual is a transgender. She wasn't born a female, but she's now a female. And it's like, of course she won for Miss Canada, and it's wonderful. She lost, but it was a human rights issue that she was able, and all the girls able to compete, and all the women are saying, she was just a wonderful person. I think she came into a tie of Miss Congeniality, and it's wonderful. It's like, it's the same way as saying, hey, blacks should be able to compete in the Miss America contest, which eventually they could, or Jackie Robinson should be able to be a baseball player. This person should be able, and I'm looking at this and saying, I would be very uncomfortable with a transgender female. I mean, like, so is that some problem to me or whatever? But the fact is, I would say that 100 years ago, the natural morality of the world would be very uncomfortable with this. But that's an example of how fluid natural morality is. So this is part of the tension. Yet the Torah seems to say there's some concept of this natural morality. Okay, so the question emerges is, what really did Sinai do? Okay, so I mentioned that with clarity and so forth. So there's a few different approaches to this issue. One is that we have this sense of something right and wrong, but we really have to fill in the dots. Okay? We really don't have a sense of what is right and wrong. We just have a sense that something's right and wrong. And therefore our ethics all really come from something outside of us telling us that something's right and wrong. We don't have an innate sense of what's right and wrong. We have from nurture being told it's right and wrong. So a lot of people turn to this idea and say that what's right and wrong really has to be stated by God. It's true, certain people have a feeling of right and wrong, but the truth is that emotion in a vacuum is just an emotion. It needs God to clarify what really is, or actually state what is right and wrong. And that really begins to say that really there's no such thing as natural morality. Okay? What happens is when God gives over his revelational ethics, there's certain ethics that we are instructed to have emotions for, and certain ethics that we are instructed not to have emotions for. Something to do with our background and so forth. So there is that approach, that really on our own we would not know right and wrong. We do have a sense of right and wrong, but that's only because we keep filling in the dots. And when you come across people, let's say like Hitler, you really see the example of it, where he basically developed a sense of right and wrong that obviously is not my sense of right and wrong. It just shows that this yardstick of what's right and wrong can be played with. So really what revelational ethics are is really all ethics have to originate with God. And a lot of people are very adamant about this, that's why atheists can't have any ethics, because for ethics to have any type of stability, there has to be some voice that says this is right. And that comes from revelation. And in that perspective, there's never an aspect of natural morality. Now the truth is that would seem to imply that what Sinai does is really state ethics to us. Okay, without Har Sinai, we would really not know what's right and wrong. Okay, once Har Sinai clarifies what's right and wrong, we're able to get our emotions of right and wrong in line in certain situations, but without Har Sinai we really not know what's right and wrong. So therefore it really was necessary for God to say, don't commit murder, don't steal. Because without that, we could have played games and done something completely different.
We still do.
Yes. Okay, yes, it's true.
That's true.
That's true. However, what happens is that if that's true, it means that the only ethics can come from revelation. So the point is okay, but Har Sinai was 2,000 years into existence. So without a revelation, can you say something was ever really absolutely wrong? So a lot of people want to try and say, well, Har Sinai is our source of ethics. Even don't commit murder is our source of ethics, because that yardstick that you think you have that existed before Har Sinai was really very fluid anyways. But these individuals who really try to argue that really point to the fact that even the ethics that we had before Har Sinai came from revelation. So there's a psik to the Rabbi Kahana, for example, that says that where we know Avodah Zarah is Aser, it was a mitzvah to Adam Rishon. Noach had the mitzvah of Yirmiyah Chai. The seven mitzvahs Bnei Noach were revelational. Okay, and it's very interesting the Rambam's language in this regard. The Rambam says that the only way that a non-Jew is considered to be mechesidi ulas ha'olam, from the righteous of the Gentile world and deserving olam haba, he says like this: V'yasa oto mibnei shetziva bahen hakadosh baruch hu b'torah. Okay, and the reason they're commanded is because God commanded them. God commanded in the Torah, v'hodianu al yidei Moshe Rabbeinu, and informed the world through Moshe Rabbeinu, shebnei Noach mekudim nistavu bahen, that Bnei Noach were already commanded in them. Okay? In other words, there's no such thing as non-revelational ethics. Don't commit murder, right from Adam Rishon. Now, it just so happens that these mitzvot, okay, that somehow connected to this emotional thing that we have inside us, feeling of ethics, it connected to these type of mitzvot. But not that they're the originator. That feeling of right and wrong is what we attach to these commandments, but not that that feeling was the originator of those commandments. Okay, and therefore the originator was from revelational ideas. So and that preceded Har Sinai. So when Har Sinai came around and said to the people, "Don't commit murder," it's true that they may have already had this. They already had this idea that it's wrong to commit murder, and may have been much more, substantial in them and formulated in them. But that's because they already were taught revelational ethics from beforehand. So this model seems to try to argue that all ethics need a source from being told what's right and wrong from God. Just some of them connect to this feeling inside ourselves of this regard. Therefore, what did Har Sinai do to ethics? Well, all Har Sinai did was basically collect the ideas beforehand and in certain ways reformulated them. Okay, like one of the examples given is, where did they know the mitzvah of Yibum from? Because there was a tzibur given to Yehuda. So whole machlokas by Yibum, Tamar. You know the story of Tamar and Yibum. Where did they get Yibum from? Was it an ethic that they had from themselves? Okay, or was it an ethic that was revelational? So some people say it just came from themselves, and what the Torah did at Har Sinai was reformulated. Say only with the brother, not with the father-in-law, only with the brother-in-law, not with the father-in-law, and so forth and so forth. But at Tamar, Yehuda was instructed any family member could fulfill the mitzvah of Yibum, including the father-in-law. It was changed for Klal Yisrael later on at Har Sinai. But the fact is that whole idea was originated from revelation. There's other sheets that said no, people themselves had this ethical development. Okay, so, but according to that perspective, all Har Sinai did is, since all your ethics come from revelation beforehand, even those ethics you now feel are part of your gut, the real source is revelational. We attach our gut to them. Okay, certain things for some reason get to our gut and certain things don't. But Har Sinai just reformulated them and recalibrated them, and now all our ethics originate from revelation. Okay, so that's one perspective. So basically, Sinai was only unique as a unique form of revelation, but as a purveyor of ethics, it had to. That's where ethics come from. It had to come from God. Okay. So that's one perspective. Okay. Within that perspective, okay, you don't really have any issues of conflict. Okay. In the sense that if all ethics originates with revelation, if God says something like to Yitzchak or to Avraham Avinu, go sacrifice your son, there's no ethical dilemma, okay? Because that original ethical perception, not to kill, is only from God anyways. So therefore, once now God is telling you to kill your son, there's no conflict. Okay, just a clarification of ethics. But this should maybe a little bit difficult. Gee, I just got into how much I really got into this emotion of this being the ethical value. But now I guess I'm wrong. Okay, so I'll reformulate my new ethical value. It's almost like saying that, a person being heavily in love with this woman and then being told, hey, you can't marry her, right? That's the woman you can marry. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm really heavily in love with this woman now, right? Because it's not the
it's not a natural change that allows for the time and the assimilation into one's.
But the fact is but the truth is that that's because it's not necessary to it, because it's not really part of your being.
Right.
This natural morality is just something you learned. You know what I mean? Love is a good example of this, in the sense that you can have an idea that, okay, this is the person you're supposed to love. What does that mean? Is there a reason why you love this person? Or is it simply that I can use a little water if you want. If it just a sense that there's a reason I love this person, it's a reason I feel this, or I have this emotion, but the emotion is totally malleable. So it's an outside entity that has to clarify who this emotion should be focused on. So if you tell me there's prohibition of murder, and the prohibition of murder is supposed to get me really upset, okay, I'm going to really have my emotions, I'm going to develop it and so forth and so forth, but not because that feeling I have is really part of my real being. It's just learned. It's learned. It's totally learned, right? So therefore, if I turn around and say, okay, now don't have this feeling anymore, okay, I can do that, okay, and this is a perspective, but it really states that all ethics have to emerge from revelation. Prior to Sinai, there were revelational events that gave over the ethics. All Sinai was the new crossroads of revelation of ethics that says, okay, this is the final clarification of ethics, and that's it, and now you got it straight, and so forth and so forth.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it really that easy to unlearn something that is a revelational ethic that has become part of you? Okay. Now, obviously, you have people who go from practicing Judaism to not observant. Okay, something like that. that's not what I'm looking at.
Right.
I'm looking at something that's more part of natural morality.
In the mind of individuals. Within this model, a person may have a very strong, feeling of right and wrong, right?
Okay.
But that feeling of right and wrong is not. It's not inherent. It's what's the right word I'm looking for? It's not inherent. It is
Like a learned
secondary. Yeah, it's learned. It's secondary. So if I really have this idea, like you see this in terms of one of the reasons people want to argue with, let's say, homosexuality being innate versus learned. If it's learned, then there's the opportunity to change it.
Right.
Okay? If it's innate, then it becomes this. The point is, if I tell you that there's a feeling inside you that says it's wrong to commit murder, but that perception it's wrong to commit murder is somehow something inside you has this feeling that something is wrong, and somehow this act of murder was sort of placed onto this idea to tell you that this was wrong. If the next stage that comes about is okay, let's change that. Will it happen overnight? No, because it's already learned, because you're feeling something. But the point is that it is possible for it to be integrated very easily. It can be changed. It can be changed. Let me try and give an example.
Well, Breivik's the example. He changed it.
Well, the truth is Breivik changed it differently because Breivik said there was another value. It's a little bit different here. Okay. It's like you have someone being very patriotic, okay, and it's patriotic for my country, okay, love it or leave it, or my country do or die or whatever. But the fact is that person sort of has this revelation saying, okay, you're no longer to care for this country, to care for that country over there. Okay.
I'm an example.
Right.
I was born in the U.S. I was absolutely patriotic, do or die.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, part of my schooling every morning, etc. And I'm in Canada longer than I was in the U.S. and allegiant to it as well. But as a dual citizen, an interesting little.
And the point is then you can get into what's that whole emotion of patriotism. See, let me give you an example. I tell this joke all the time. There's a Bill Cosby joke that basically says that he's playing football, and he's in the huddle, and he's quarterback says, "Okay, Cosby, up the middle." And he says, "Wow, this is exciting when we finally get the ball, right?" And okay, so I get the ball, and there I am going for where there's supposed to be a hole, and then I see it. 6'6", 285 pounds, just buster across his top. And I'm looking and saying, why does this man want to hurt me? And it dawns on me, he doesn't really want to hurt me. He wants the ball. So I gave it to him. Now the truth is, he was so thankful to it. I even started blocking for him because he scored a touchdown. Now my coach was a little bit upset with me for this, but the way I look at it is better to not have a broken bone than to have than to keep the ball. We all live with structures. How malleable are those structures? And that's what comes when you start talking with this first model. The challenge of the first model is the fact that we have this feeling of right and wrong. So what is that feeling of right and wrong? So it seems to say to us, this really is right, or this really is wrong. And what this model is implying is that revelational ethics says, no, what's right and wrong is what God tells you is right and wrong. And your feelings of what's right and wrong are actually fluid and malleable. And the history of the world from a Jewish perspective, from this model, says that all ethics were introduced by God in revelational ways. So Sinai was only the foremost revelational event. Prior there were other revelations. Sinai's revelational event overturned the previous revelational events. So therefore, it all comes down to that all ethics are revelational. So all ethics really are in the same category as pork is usher. God tells you pork is usher. But certain things you have a feeling for. Yes, you have a feeling for it, but that feeling doesn't tell you what's ethical. Somehow the human feeling connects with certain ethics to have this feeling that it is ethical. Now, one of the things that I find interesting about that is let me just make this one thing, is that this allows for issues of chukim and mishpatim to change. It's possible that something that was perceived to be a mishpat 500 years ago was now perceived to be a chok, and this is actually happening with let's say homosexuality, in the sense that now there's a trend for people to put homosexuality in the same category with pork. In other words, rabbis are basically, and I presented this argument, also in the sense that because the Torah says that it's usher, okay, doesn't necessarily mean I have to have an emotional response to it. I have to say it's usher. I'm not going to play with it. I'm not going to limit the fact that it's usher. But the point is that it is not necessarily. 500 years ago, clearly people had the idea that this was something I was supposed to have this ethical response to. I could sit there and say, you know something, it's like pork, and therefore I can't explain why it's usher, but it is. And that's an example where our chukim and mishpatim absolute, or do they change as well? Well, that's really because this feeling inside us, which we call natural morality, is not really a creator of morality. It's really just a way of identifying morality. And from a Torah perspective, in that perspective, you always recognize that ethics are always what God tells you. Yeah.
I think that when you're talking about revelational morality versus natural morality, it sounds like natural morality itself is a myth, but it is always revelational, which is your coin. But I mean,
according to this model, it's
according to this model. But
right.
The fact is where does our natural morality come from? Because when you see small children are have their self-interest.
Nurture.
Exactly. So it is taught. So it is taught very young as a revelation.
Right.
It is universal enough that we accept it as natural. Right. But there is no such thing as natural morality.
That would see that what would happen is that the feeling that we have, that we call natural morality, is something that we assign to some of these revelational ethics. For whatever reason, we have a feeling about murder, we don't have a feeling about pork. Okay, but that's simply because of the way we responded. Maybe there's something about the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed it in us, that certain things affect us a certain way and so forth. But not that it creates the morality in any way. It is not really a force of morality.
The only natural morality would be the law of the jungle. That is, the bigger eats the smaller. That would be...
See, that's an interesting question. That's really a very interesting question. Because my wife is just reading a book on the Bushmen, and she told me that the Bushmen, when they very interesting, in the book she was saying the Bushmen came to this person who wrote the book was studying the Bushmen, and some Bushmen came to where they were, and they gave their traditional greeting, and then they said, "We're starving to death. We need some food and water." And they gave it to him. Okay, it was very nice. And then someone said something about the fact that they would, what's the word I'm looking for? That the Bushmen always follow lightning, because lightning is some indication of rain and so forth and so forth. So the guy who sort of was the interpreter for the Bushmen, who sort of knew the Bushmen, said, once lightning comes, I just want you to know, you'll wake up one morning and they won't be here anymore. And the guy who's the anthropologist he's really shocked by this. What about what about saying thank you? I mean, we gave him food, so what about the idea of saying thank you and saying goodbye? And he says Bushmen don't have that idea. They don't have a word for thank you. Why? Because when you give them food like this, they just think you're acting like a good person. They just think that that's what people do. That's what a good person does. In other words, it's not, oh wow, this needs thank you. It's simply a statement where, of course I'm going to give you this because that's what good people do. So there's no reason for you to say thank you. Now, the truth is, from a halakhic perspective, since I bring that up, most people don't recognize this from the concept of a keres hatov. It's not thank you that matters. It's recognizing good that matters. Therefore, for Moshe Rabbeinu, he didn't hit the water and he didn't hit the ground. It's the recognizing that you've benefited from something. It's a different perspective in the sense that it's this idea that since I've benefited, okay, I have to be makir tov, and therefore I have to respond in kind with hakeres hatov. It's a different perspective. But that, therefore, thank you is not, oh, I have to say thank you. It's the fact that I have to mark that you've done something good, and I have to indicate that I recognize that. Even though you may have done the good on your own. You may have been a good person. That's what the difference of Jewish perspective is. It has nothing to do with the Bushmen. It has something to do with it's nothing to do with whether the person was good for doing it. It's interesting because I've been thinking about an idea recently in terms of the concept of Zen en lo chaser. There's a concept that says that if you benefit and the other person doesn't lose anything, there's that person entitled to compensation. Okay, so for example, if you have a piece of land up in the Muskoka, and someone goes onto that land during the wintertime when you're not there, and without causing any damage to the land whatsoever, and not in any way lessening the value of the land, and the land was not being used anyways, he's not charging for it, so he's not avoiding rent or avoiding paying some rent or whatever. The person just happens to spend a few hours on that land. Okay? Can you sue him for compensation? So we say no. We say that suing for compensation is midat stone. In fact, that was the problem with the Sodomites. The Sodomites, Lot was giving them food, and they say, hey, you can't give food, and the people weren't able to pay. What was the problem with the Sodomites? They said, well, let's use their body. It wasn't the fact that they were actually homosexual. It was the fact that, no, they have to pay. We can't accept someone getting something for nothing. Okay? That was a real evil of stone. Even though the Sodomites themselves, the town people, didn't lose anything. Lot was the one doing it. No, we can't have them getting something for nothing. So the point is, but from Jewish perspective, if you don't lose, if the other person doesn't lose, then he can't sue you for compensation. Just because you benefit. However, there's another concept in Jewish law called Sono Matanas Yechia that says that a person who hates gifts will live. So the truth is that since you've benefited, even if the other person didn't lose anything, you should feel a sense of responsibility to give, to accept it, and to acknowledge it. And to respond to it. So that was a mistake in the Bushmen, and the Bushmen are just basically saying, hey, you're just doing the right thing. From a Jewish perspective, yes, the person's doing the right thing, but you have now an obligation to recognize good. But we're a little bit off topic, but the point is that you see this Bushman have these values. But where did this value come from? It was nurtured. Okay? But the point is they're talking about a good person. This is a good person. Well, but what is your yardstick a real yardstick? Well, what we're saying is the only yardstick is a revelational yardstick according to this model. Okay. So but then you have then of the yardsticks that Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us from a revelational model, we still have a an emotional response to choose ones that do touch upon us. And I'm saying even the possibility that they may change over time, such as what's happening with homosexuality and so forth. That's one model. Okay. Any questions about that? Does anyone have problems with that model? Are people happy with all ethics being revelational? Okay. There's another model. Okay. There's another model that basically says that ethics, natural morality, is something that we have within ourselves and has some validity. I've always felt that from a Torah perspective that the clearest example of that is the story of the Yetzer Dust over Ra. Okay? Knowing good and evil. Right? The fact is Rabbi Nissim, in his discussion of Shem Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, understands that Shem Mitzvahs Bnei Noach to reflect natural morality. Okay? Moses Mendelssohn favored that perspective in answering the classic philosophical question of the 1700s in terms of rational morality, and said that Judaism does have rational morality, okay, as you see from the 7 Noahide laws. Okay, if you remember, Moshe Mendelssohn was a big Talmud Chacham, okay, and basically from. Okay, I'm not going to get into, but basically from his perspective, is from Torah. Nissim Gaon has that perspective that there is a value in natural morality. Okay, in a certain way, it's an easier way of understanding mishpatim. There is this sense of natural morality, so the Torah gives us laws that somehow connect to natural morality, and that's why we have emotions towards them, because don't commit murder connects to our natural morality. That's why we feel that's wrong to commit murder. Since we have this yardstick, and this yardstick is real, those revelational laws that don't touch those yardsticks, we have no problems with. That's chukim, that's it. But there are revelational laws that do connect to our this natural morality, and that's why we have feelings towards them. But then the question emerges is, what's the point of the revelational laws? Why did you say this for? Why doesn't the rational morality give you the right answer? So I explained that the Tzaddik Gaon and the Rav explained that natural morality is unclear. So you need some clarification at the fringes from revelational ethics. Why was the natural morality more clear then? Why do we have this natural morality that you're saying is actually in our perspective and actually gives us some indication vis-a-vis the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach, and actually is a real thing? So why isn't it clear? And why does Revelation touch upon it? Let it be separate. Okay? So there's this other model. And this other model looks at the Yetzer Dust Tov Ra and says that there's some value to this natural morality. But there are questions, there are new questions like that, because you see, the biggest problem is you do have conflicts. Okay? And what's an example of the conflict? The Akedah. Okay? The Akedah was an example where, hey, it's on. Now, some people might say that Avraham Avinu had a problem because because there was a conflict in revelational morality. He had don't kill, and he had this. Well, the last statement of God obviously takes precedence, so it's simple. But if you look at it in terms of natural morality, does he have his perception? But the fact is, aside from the Akedah, you do see an issue with Avram challenging God, which seems to be from natural morality, and that's from Avram's argument with God at stone. Okay? Hashoifet kol haaretz liyaseh mishpat. Right? So the fact is that Rav Aaron Lichtenstein points out that that's the source for natural morality. Okay? But the way he presents it is natural morality should only be used beyond revelational ethics. It's lifnim mishuras hadin. There's revelational ethics, that's the basic thing, and then natural morality is giving you ethics beyond the revelational ethics, which also ties into things like Kedoshim Tiyu and stuff like that, that we have our sense of natural morality that enables us to go beyond the revelational ethics. But there's people argue and say, no, wait a second. Even from revelational ethics, it's not that there was a natural morality that told us about Kedoshim Tiyu. There were other statements, other forms of revelational ethics that basically some was law, and then there were stories beyond the revelational ethics, such as the stories in Bereshis, that God gave us in the revelational system, law, and things that you're supposed to go beyond the law. But what really happens when you really look at Ron Lichtenstein's argument, what really is his argument? So you have to go back to the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra statement. What does the Nachash say to Adam and Chava? If you eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, what will happen to you? V'hayita ke'elokim. You'll be like God. Right? Now, the fact is Nachash lying. There's no indication Nachash was lying. The fact is, what is Elokim? Elokim is a decision maker. What happens with natural morality is the fact that we are given ingredients or perceptions that allow us to be decision makers. And that's why, in a certain way, I don't think Rabbi says it this way when he talks about the story of Sodom. But what comes out is the issue is not Avram saying, like, why are you killing him? Yes, they told me justice is important, I don't see the justice. But the fact is, the simple answer is, well, hey, I'm God, I know what's right. Okay, I'm walking home. I don't understand. The fact is that if that was the answer, just getting the right answer, then God could look at Moshe and look at Avram and say, hey, I made the decision. That's obviously the right answer. But the question of Avraham Avinu really was, it's not enough for you to do the right thing. Part of my objective is to understand justice. And if you look in terms of one of the mitzvahs of the Torah, I think it's command number 611, is Falachad b'drachav, is to emulate God. To emulate God means Mahu Rachum Afata Hayirachum. Like He's merciful, you have to be merciful. Same way, the way that He applies justice. Avram Avinu is saying, but it's important for me to know justice, right? Because I have to learn it. So what you're talking about when you talk about natural morality is the integration of the concepts in making decisions of this nature. And therefore, if you talk revelational ethics and all things like that, that's very nice for the final conclusions. Okay? And I can never work with a conclusion. I can't be involved in decision making. But if you understand that natural morality is really the building blocks of how we make decisions, what is charitable, what is merciful, what is justice, then you understand that you can't just rely upon a revelational statement. You have to rely upon an understanding of the concept. And that understanding of the concept is what we really are defining with natural morality. So in that regard, natural morality is our perception of the underlying concepts, which must have some validity if we are going to be godlike. If we're going to be the Eved Hashem solely, in terms of just following what God tells us to do, then God can tell us to do it, and that's it, we'll just do it. But if we're going to be a Tzelem Elokim, again, the word Elokim is used in terms of talking about the image of God, and Hayita Kelokim, like the Nachash said to Adam and Chava, then we have to understand the principles of making that decision. So therefore, it becomes something where natural morality has to be something real. Right? Otherwise, how can we be godlike? Now this is the tension in certain ways. So the point is, if that's true, and we're supposed to work with natural morality, why is natural morality so unclear? If we're supposed to have a natural morality, why is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just give us the ability to get that feeling of when life ends, when life begins? Why was it a necessity to have a revelational ethics imposed upon a natural morality? Yeah.
Maybe it's a question of motivation. I mean, a lot of people can have a feeling, for example, that murder is wrong, and primitive societies can have a sense that, well, if people go around murdering, that'll disrupt the order of society and eventually won't have anybody left. But how many people would still have a feeling that murder is wrong if nobody will ever catch you or implement consequences for it? And what if, well, maybe the person isn't so nice, or maybe it's an orphan newborn that would just be bringing on resources, so maybe we're able to rationalize our way out of natural morality when it becomes inconvenient for us.
Wait.
Sorry, can I add to that?
Yeah.
That when the Nachash said, V'hayitem ke'Elohim, then Elohim is a plural. It's not that a shofet of one clear... You're getting into Elohim is the way we refer to God. So you're right. But the fact is It is, but right. What I'm saying is that the structure of the word is plural.
Right.
It's not simply a shofet that looks at one question and answers one question with a gut of natural morality, but rather Elohim is judging many cases at once. And that's why we have a gray zone.
It's interesting because you'll see where I'm going to go. That actually is something I'm not going to steal from you whenever I write my book, and absolutely forget that it came from you. So don't expect to be even footnoted. You know, I don't know where I got this from, but obviously it's irrelevant.
But obviously I'm brilliant.
I'll explain why in a second. It's an interesting perspective. I'll see, because you'll see where I'm going to go with this. But the fact is, no, I think it's actually an interesting idea what you're saying. There is something else here. See, the fact is, I didn't mention it was something like this. If you look at the Rambam's statement, the Rambam is the one who's very big on Mishpatim, but he makes a very interesting statement. He says, in the statement where he says that you're only mechasidi umas ha'olam if you accept it from being commanded, but if you do it from your das, okay? And there's a difference in Girsa. It says either v'lo mechachamechem, if you do it from das, from your own intellectual perspective, okay, you're not mechasidim maslom, and then there's a difference in Girsa. One Girsa says v'lo mechachamechem, and one Girsa says elo mechachamechem. Now most scholars want to say it means the Rambam says elo mechachamechem. So most of the people who are really into it and look at Girsas, it's Elam Chachamim. The Rambam is saying that you're not Mechasim, but you're from Chachamim. But what's the point and benefit of being from Chasidim Musalam versus being Mechachamim? Chachamim is also pretty good. Because Mechasidim Musalam are the people who are Kona Olam Haba. So in terms of punishment, right, if he's basically saying, if you do it because you think it's right, and that seems to be an indication that the Rambam does believe that there's some value to natural morality. He's not really a proponent of the first system. But if you're doing it because it's something inside you that feels a gut, whatever it is, that doesn't entitle you to the future world. That's not even, okay? What entitles you to the future world? Because you do it from revelation. Okay? Now, what's the point of that? It's because the fact that there's a God does bring in the world the perception of reward and punishment. We talk about Judaism having as one of the ikarim reward and punishment. A lot of people look at it and say, oh, that sort of cheapens it. I'm just doing it for this and so forth. Understand? Reward and punishment means that there's a consequence, and that once you recognize the consequence has to be outside of you, because internally, you speak to most hitmen. Hitmen will say, it's like the old Flip Wilson. You guys remember Flip Wilson? Mm-hmm. I'm sort of giving my age, okay? Is that before your time, Flip Wilson? A little bit, okay. The fact is the devil made me do it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the perception is you sort of know, like, Hannah Arendt had a real problem with Eichmann because Eichmann didn't understand he was doing evil. But when you see it, so there was the guys who thought they were really righteous because they were Nazis. Then you had Eichmann who, I was just doing my job. But the guys that you really sort of understood were like was the guys who said, I knew I was doing evil, but I had to do it for the money, right? Like people like the idea that like an evil like I know it's evil, but I was tempted by the money or by the pleasure or by that, right?
So draw the line of how Breivik is different than that.
What you're getting at is actually a much more complicated model. And it really shows where revelation, and I think in this complicated model, where revelation really creates a transformation on ethics. There are two aspects to ethics. One is our feeling of what is right and wrong. Okay, what Kant would call the categorical imperative. Okay, just throwing out that idea. It's wrong to commit murder, right? The fact is that is a feeling that exists in a vacuum. That's all that is. What I think came from the Eish Hadas Tov Ra is those feelings in a vacuum. I can sit down a bunch of values and say it's wrong to commit murder, wrong to do this, so forth. And then I can get into the fact that it's hazy. But what really happens what makes it hazy? What really makes things hazy? It's the fact that it starts to conflict with other values. Now, when you talk in terms of those values, if you think in terms of ethics as values or as emotions, then you have conflicts in many ways. For example, you see, what happens when you start thinking it this way is that an emotion of what we would call an ethical emotion, on a certain way, is no different from any other desire that a human being wishes to follow. When you see, let's say, an individual who commits adultery, okay, what's the conflict that person is going through? It's, oh, I'm cheating on my wife and it's going to hurt my wife or whatever. Okay, I shouldn't use Mike because the person is saying he's going to cheat on his wife or whatever. But on the other hand, there will be pleasure because of this. So I have a conflict between pleasure and the fact that I would feel bad about cheating on the wife. Well, why should cheating on the wife be the one you choose with? Why should you go with that? Well, the reason you're going to go with that is because you have tremendous feeling for that. So the truth is that the pleasure that you're going to get from committing the adultery is basically you're going to look at it and say, hey, that's less than the pleasure I'm going to get from the adultery. So basically, you're looking and you're weighing it. And you're saying, Jay, there's the ethical person. It's because I choose A over B. But the bottom line is the person who chooses B over A was making the same decision as you are. Just chose a different emotion. On the most simplistic level, right? Okay, it's like I can choose chocolate or I can choose, jelly beans. But why should you choose the chocolate? Well, because which is the stronger emotion at the time. But the bottom line is that if you really look at it, what makes someone's point choose A over B? If you only look at it in terms of the ethical perspective, it's simply because that emotion inside of me is stronger. Because there's really no objective reason for me to say A over B. And the truth is this is what happens in our world today. In our world today, we start saying, something, other values. And then what happens is you extend the values out. And you begin to understand that there's a whole variety of emotions. And if you look at the movies, the way they portray adultery, in that movie, what was it, the Meryl Streep movie with Clint Eastwood, where she commits adultery. Bridges of Madison County, which she commits adultery, but she's the heroine, it's a beautiful story and so forth and so forth. Why? I didn't see the movie because my understanding is her relationship with her husband is loveless anyways, or maybe even abusive. You guys fill me in, I don't know. This relationship is remarkably loving. It's a tryst that doesn't hurt us because they'll never find out. So you take all these things that she's deserving of some love, at least for 2 days or whatever it is, and there's this pleasure that is really a nice pleasure, and so forth and so forth, and it's not going to hurt. The fact is what you've done is you presented a whole model. And in the end, what you basically said is that the value of real love overrides this legal jargon of adultery. So basically what you've done is right. The truth is if you really look at ethics, we have those gut feelings within ourselves. And they are powerful feelings within ourselves. Some have it more intensely, some have it less intensely. But there's another side to ethics. And that's how you decide between the emotions. There's one thing to say that what I think in terms of natural morality is we have feelings inside us of right and wrong. But the point is what makes right always win? It doesn't. So you say, well, okay, fine. Well, the person chose evil. Okay, based on what yardstick? When you look at good and evil, what's the yardstick that you choose from? Right? Guy chose evil. Okay, fine. Why should he not have chosen evil? Because it was wrong to choose this over that. Okay, based on what? Based upon the yardstick that it's wrong to choose this over that. But what's the other yardstick? What happened with Breivik, if you look at it, that's exactly what he did. He chose another value. He said, I know that it was wrong to commit murder, but the value of protecting Norway was more significant. Right? Now you look at this very interestingly. Okay? Breivik's a terrorist. Okay? A guy who you look at people who make decisions that they're going to make this kind of decision for some greater cause. Kamikaze pilots in Japan, right? They felt it was okay to commit suicide and to take out an American ship and kill all those soldiers, right? Because there was a greater value for Japan, right?
Same with any jihadi.
Exactly. Every jihadi says that.
But every soldier in the war.
Every soldier in the war does that. The fact of the matter is,
for the greater good.
The fact of the matter is Lahavdil Havdei we have Shimshon HaGibor doing the same decision, right? That it's better to take out these people, right? Okay, for the sake of Klal Yisrael. The fact is that what makes that decision distinct? So this is where I think revelational ethics happens. What the Torah says is that in Har Sinai is it did not just give another set of emotions or another set of rights and wrongs. Okay, here are rights and wrongs that are revelational, and these are ones you're supposed to have as emotional. There's another set of rights and wrongs which are not emotional, such as don't eat pork, but another set of rights and wrongs. That's not what Har Sinai did. What Har Sinai did was gave over Torah. And what Torah really is about is giving you the yardstick of how to make decisions. You have to have a sense of justice. True, you have to have a sense of justice. But what's unique in the Torah system? In the Torah system, it doesn't take away the individual decision making of a person. If you really get down to it, Aseh Lecha Rav is the first decision you have to make. What does that mean? Choose the person who's going to make decisions for you. But in the end, by Lo B'Shamayim, what the Torah did is basically saying by Lo B'Shamayim is that I am giving over the system. What Revelation is giving over to you is the system of how you can balance and make decisions with all those emotions that you have, including the emotions of values. And that's what happened at Har Sinai that was unique. It was not just simple revelation of new principles, although it did modify some of the principles that would exist with natural morality. What it basically said was, okay, at the Eitz Das Tov Ra, you got those feeling of those emotions of right and wrong. Torah added some of them from Revelation, the ideas to show obedience to God. according to the Rambam. But what it did is, okay, you have to know how to make decisions between those things. So the argument with Avraham Avinu is the Shechet V'Olar Tzayasa Mishpat. What happens with Moshe Rabbeinu is he doesn't hear the answer when he answers, how do you have Tzadik V'Ralo? His question is, Kosh Baruch Hu's answer is, you won't understand, because there are times where other values may override the simple value of justice. Even though the value of justice is cardinal. There's other considerations. In the end, when we recognize the Kodesh Baruch Hu and we say we're following Torah even though we don't understand it, we're basically saying in that mismatch of trying to figure out all these things, we can't make that decision. But up until that point in time, we have to make that decision. So we have to struggle with that decision. It's an interesting thing, just that this is a whole issue. This idea of revelation. Many years ago, I gave a talk about Har Sinai, about revelation, and I pointed out that at revelation, you basically had Klal Yisrael, the famous statement in the Gemara that says Koifalim Har Kigigis, God placed a mountain over them, and the question says, if that's true, that destroys the contract. Right? Well, what does that mean?
It means they were automatically placed under pressure, and the decision wasn't a free one.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that's the idea of a melech. It's the idea of a king. Melech HaMasuv Ala'am, you don't have free choice. So what's the point? That's the whole concept of revelation. That is the concept of revelation. God says, do this. You're saying. I mean, if you think about them, and if you don't do it, I'm going to punish you. And I'm putting a mountain over you, and say, if you don't do this, you're going to die. Well, guess what? If I don't do it, I'm going to die anyways, right? Well, I mean, what's the idea over here? And then it says, no, at Purim, Kimu Kibu Kfar, you already accepted. You look at this and say, what the heck are you talking about? You needed a contract? Fact is that at Har Sinai, Sinai had to have a revelational aspect in terms of God as king. There's no doubt about that. God is king. That's clear. We had natural morality. We had some decision making in our natural morality. I mean, that's the role of physics, philosophy, and trying to figure those things out. We had revelational aspects here. God's in charge. But what really did Torah give us? What were we involved in? If you read in terms of it, is what did God really give us? And when we said Natsav and NISHMA, people say, what are you going through with this Natsav and NISHMA? Natsav and NISHMA we will do, and then we'll understand, because only through doing will we understand, in order to become a decision maker, in order to make these decisions, to understand how things come together. So you say, for example, famous Medrash, God went to Edom and said, what's in it? We want the Torah. He said, sure. What's in it? Don't murder. He says, we can't do that. Everything we are murderers. That's basically saying, listen, we have a natural morality of don't murder. But so we're doing that because God tells us to do it, and there's a punishment if we don't do it. But if you're telling us that we're supposed to have some concept of understanding this, well, everything that we are is a murderer. So how do we connect with this concept of don't murder, when everything we feel is that it's okay to do these things?
Especially since, even though we have this concept,
right,
we murder anyway.
Right, yeah. So, but the point is, and therefore the answer has to be, you have to get involved in the system, nasa, v'nishma. It's not nasa, it's not just doing it. It's nasa in order to understand how you make these decisions with these concepts. So I made this whole argument, and I spoke at a shul here in Toronto, and I've never spoken again in that shul. It's already, close to 30 years, no, about 25 years ago. I never spoke again in that shul, because some people in the shul said I sounded like David Hartman. And the truth is that I did and I didn't. Because if you read David Hartman's latest book, he basically says there are times a person has to follow his natural morality versus the revelational statement. Otherwise, but his argument is, otherwise you're not godlike. And the truth is, as I was saying, something very similar. But what I was saying is, if I'm in conflict with the revelational statement, I'm already not godlike because I'm not making the decision that God would make. But I'm on the path. What I was arguing is Torah is on being on the path of moving to understand that decision.
So
okay?
Would you say then that revelational ethics give us the framework for what is essentially similar to eating food versus eating food with a bracha before it?
Yes, but I would take it a little bit different.
Okay.
It's like in a case of choosing between chocolate and jelly beans. It's knowing the issue of nutrition.
It's first, don't you?
Knowing the issue of nutrition, and then deciding why you're making a decision for nutrition.
Okay.
And why is it? And then you get the issue, the classic line: "Yeah, I'll live longer." But what's the point of living longer if I'm not going to have any fun? So the fact is, it's in those issues. So the truth is when you start saying brachas, you begin. But the brachas doesn't mean I'm not supposed to enjoy the food. In fact, bracha may make you feel better about enjoying the food because someone I heard someone saying something about the fact that one of the reasons the bracha is motivated is by the fact that I enjoy the food and therefore I'm saying this bracha. I appreciate God even more. But the fact is what revelational ethics does in the revelational system is it doesn't just give you more laws. It really gives you a system of how to balance all the values that we have to deal with. And included in those values are things that people don't understand as values, such as there's a value in pleasure, for example. Because if you have some pleasure, it makes life tolerable. So there's a value in that. There's a value in love. There's a value in these things. And these are things that are supposed to be balanced out. But you just have to,
because even without revelational ethics, you have that sense.
You have that sense, but what revelational ethics does is basically give you the yardsticks to be able to balance it out with the idea of being at Tzelem Elokim.
Okay.
Right?
Does it also sort of give yardsticks to balance out different things without the person themselves kind of becoming selfily involved in the decision?
In a certain way, the self is also maintained because you're dealing with a yardstick that wasn't just created by yourself, which becomes somewhat of the issue. It
has to necessarily be external, although internalized.
But it has to be. The way I understand it is very true. But the way I work with that is by truly understanding Elu ve'elu. See, one of the things about Judaism is that you really have to pick a derech in Judaism, which means that you have to pick a posek, okay? Or you have to pick someone you're going to follow, and that usually has something to do with the kind of person you are. So people who are Hasidim, like Hasidus. People who are Misnah, like Hasidim. People who are in the yeshiva world, like yeshivas. They like that world. The difference is the minute you understand Elu ve'elu, and that person made a decision like this, and now it becomes that there's another decision can be made, another decision can be made, and they're all intellectually have their arguments and so forth, it makes you understand to question your own self. So there's an aspect of understanding the level of your own, the only way you can make a decision is with yourself. You're the one who eventually says, Aseh lecha Rav. You have to make yourself you have to make a Rav. You're the one who chooses a Rav. But the fact is you begin to understand the complexity of that decision when you understand that you're choosing someone. You can't sit there and say, this is absolutely the right guy. I'm choosing someone I think is going to make the right decisions, but there's other people making different decisions. See, what I think happens with revelation is a much more complex understanding of the ethics, because what it comes down to is you have that little angel and the little devil on your shoulder. Okay? Sometimes you don't know who the little angel is, and sometimes you don't know who the little devil is. Okay, that's the first thing. But even more than that, why would you pick the angel over the devil? Okay? In other words, given the fact that you're going to pick the angel because you think it's right and you feel good about picking the angel, why do you do it? Once you understand that you have no reason to pick the angel over the devil.
It's the same process. It's the same decision either way. It's just the choice you make.
Right. The fact is, once you understand that you need a system to make you understand what's going on, so forth and so forth, then you begin to understand what Torah is about. And that really what Torah comes down to is the fact that am I going to abide by the system of making that decision between the devil and the angel, or I'm not? So if a person says, I'm not going to follow Torah, I'm going to follow an ascetic lifestyle because I want to feel that closeness to God from asceticism, well, that's interesting. You made that decision. What you're really rejecting is a system that says this is the way you should make that decision. And revelational ethics then becomes ultimately the way, the system of making decisions in natural morality. The developing of those natural moral perspectives is one world, that's in natural morality, and how you make decisions between that.